So as far as OWL updates, there's not really much going on. If you have any questions or anything about certain shifts or something that you want to know more information about, message me after this and we can definitely talk through anything that you're confused about, or any other concerns, comments you have about OWL. But other than that, we have a really awesome meeting coming up for you guys. We have meteorologist Rick Smith of NWS Norman here. So without further ado, Rick, if you're ready, we're excited to hear your talk.
All right, thank you, Jenna, appreciate it. All right, I'm gonna try to share my screen here, so stand by. All right, can you see the PowerPoint slide? You can? All right.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, good. Well, it's great to be able to talk to you guys. Miss seeing you in the building and miss seeing lots of things, but that's how it is. Appreciate the invitation as always. I've got some slides to talk about kind of what our office does, what my job is, and talk a little bit specifically about what we've been doing since the pandemic began, how we've changed our operations. Hopefully there'll be some time for questions. So if you've got questions as we go along, I guess you could type those in the chat and we'll take them at the appropriate time, but don't hesitate. Even if it's something we don't cover in the presentation, if there's something you want to know about the Weather Service, getting a job, working at the Weather Service, anything like that, we can touch on that too. I don't have slides dedicated to it, but certainly we can talk about anything y'all want to. So we'll get right into it. Our office, which is on the second floor of the Weather Center, is one of 122 local National Weather Service forecast offices around the country. Each of these offices has what's called a CWA, or County Warning Area, an area of responsibility, and that's a group of counties or parishes or independent cities, wherever you may be, that office is responsible for. So each office is responsible for all the weather information for that group of counties, forecast, warnings, aviation, climate information, river forecast, and lots of other things like that. So that's kind of where we fit into the network. Within the state of Oklahoma, there are 4 different National Weather Service WFOs that service the 77 counties in the state of Oklahoma. Our office in Norman serves the bulk of the state, 48 counties. The Tulsa office covers much of eastern Oklahoma, except for McCurtain County in far southeast Oklahoma. That's covered by the Shreveport, Louisiana office. And then the Panhandle, the 3 Panhandle counties are covered by the Weather Service in Amarillo. Each of these offices is staffed kind of similarly. There's the Tulsa office and the Norman office probably have a little bit more staffing than the other 2, but they're all pretty much the same and have the same basic level of service and the same services that we provide. This is a picture of our office during a big severe weather event over the past couple of years. It wasn't this year, but probably last year. It's important to remember that each WFO, each forecast office is staffed for quiet weather. So we're staffed for a quiet weather day. So when we have a severe weather day or winter weather, fire weather, any kind of big day that requires more help, then we have to call in extra people. So that means calling people in on their day off, people staying late, coming in early. Of course, with the pandemic, all that's changed. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, how we've changed our severe weather and significant event operations. But it is kind of an all hands on deck approach when we have one of those big days, like a big severe weather outbreak day or a huge winter storm or something like that. This is one of the situations in this picture where basically every chair in the room is full, and it's unusual to have this many people for a severe weather event, but I think this was a moderate risk, or maybe one of the high risk days in 2019 where we had all these people involved. So there's challenges with being a meteorologist. There's challenges with working in the National Weather Service. There's challenges that are specific to our office. Wherever you end up going in your career, whether you go to television, whether you go to the National Weather Service, or whether you move on to research or the private sector, there's going to be challenges. And certainly we have our fair share around here in central and western Oklahoma. Of course, severe weather is what gets all the attention, and we've had our fair share of tornadoes and violent tornadoes here. These are just some of the violent tornadoes that have happened in the Norman office just since I've been here. I got here in January of 2002, and the top left-hand image is a violent tornado, an F4 tornado that hit parts of Oklahoma City and more on May 8th of 2003. And then the upper right-hand corner is the Lone Grove tornado from February of 2009. And then the three bottom images are three violent tornadoes that were for a while were going on simultaneously on May 24th, 2011. And in fact, two of these tornadoes were headed directly toward Norman. One was headed directly toward the Weather Center. In fact, that's probably the scariest moment I've had as a meteorologist at the Weather Center is this day, looking out the window at the dark skies to the southwest. And we started having debris falling down out of the sky and at the Weather Center from some of the destroyed homes and structures southwest of us. So that was one of the more stressful times personally in the office. And then of course there's been more. These are some of the 2013 violent tornadoes on May 19th, May 20th, of course, May 31st. And we've had violent tornadoes, strong tornadoes since then. So certainly severe weather gets the bulk of the attention around here. And we are one of the busier severe weather offices. In an average year, we probably issue more severe thunderstorm warnings than any other office. And very often we're up there with a number of tornado warnings as well. This year, thankfully, has been quiet, and I will not complain one bit about not winning the contest for issuing the most warnings or having the most tornadoes. I'll never complain about that. But it's not just tornadoes. We have everything you can imagine here, as you probably already know, everything from damaging wind and hailstorms that can cause just as much damage as a tornado. The wildfires can really get crazy around here. We're very concerned about what our wildfire season is going to be looking like going forward as we get into the winter and the early spring months. Of course, that wildfire season kind of peaks in the March and April timeframe. So we'll be very interested in how that's going to develop. Flooding, of course, winter storms, ice storms, snowstorms, things like that are very, very common around here as well. And we're no stranger to disasters here in this area. Since 2002, there's been over 40 major disaster declarations from FEMA in our area in Oklahoma and western North Texas. So that's probably not as many as California, but that's right up there at the top as far as being a busy office with a lot of weather to deal with, and it's pretty much year round. That's not unique to our office, certainly, but that is one of the things that our office is known for, is being a very busy office. You don't come and work at the Norman office if you're, if you want to kick back and take it easy, because we don't have a lot of quiet, just completely dead times for extended periods of time. Of course, as the storms, as meteorologists, we're interested in storms. I got into weather because I was fascinated by severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. So that's kind of what I was passionate about. I'm still passionate about it. But dealing with the impacts is another challenge. When you're a meteorologist and a scientist and you're looking at the radar and you see the colored blobs moving across the screen, it's fascinating and it's from a scientific perspective. But when you see the real life impacts of those storms, it's a whole other thing. And different meteorologists have different experiences, but the longer I do this job, some of the impacts really start to outweigh the fascination and the excitement about severe weather. Still get excited about severe weather, but it's more of a mixture of dread and professional excitement versus just, gosh, I hope we have some good storms tomorrow. I'm more and more to the point of, of course, we never want to be wrong on the forecast, but not going to complain too much if we don't get a lot of severe weather. Seeing events like this, these are some images immediately after the tornado that struck Newcastle and Oklahoma City and more on May 20th of 2013. It hit three separate schools, and of course there were fatalities at one of the schools. And dealing with this, going on damage surveys and looking at this damage and interacting with the people that were directly impacted by the tornado or whatever the severe weather is. It could be a hurricane or a flood or a wildfire. That's one of the things that you don't really get training for in a university or even in the Weather Service. We're working on that. We're working to improve that. But dealing with the psychological, the mental health, emotional health aspects of the job is something new that we're really starting to talk about as an agency and as a profession. There's been sessions at AMS and NWA talking about these issues, and certainly going and seeing scenes like this. This was the makeshift memorial that was set up at Plaza Towers Elementary School in Moore, where 7 students were killed by the tornado. And this was done in just the immediate weeks and months after the tornado, as they were beginning construction on the new school. There's, of course, there's very nice memorials there for the students now. But yeah, I can't, and most people really can't separate the scientist part from the human being part. So one thing to think about as you're going into a meteorology career is there are going to be personal impacts, maybe not the storm itself impacting you or your family, but certainly the impacts of either the shift work or the hours or just the stresses of the event, and dealing with things like this, dealing with, the chances are at some point in your career, you're going to be involved in an event where someone dies. And despite your best efforts, no matter how good the warnings are, sometimes that's going to happen. So again, not to be Debbie Downer, not to discourage anyone from anything at all. I wouldn't change anything for the world as far as my job and what I've been able to do. But there's an awareness now that we need to be thinking about this more. And as we think about mental health and emotional health, it's important to think about this kind of thing. Another one of the challenges specifically about working in this area is, because of the frequency of severe weather and because of the number of damaging killer tornadoes that we've had in recent years, we have a very storm anxious community out there. There's a lot of storm anxiety, a lot of weather anxiety, weather phobia, fear, whatever you want to call it. We have, anytime there's thunder in the forecast, even if it's 11 days out on one of the TV stations' forecast, we have callers, people calling us on the phone and sending us messages on Facebook about, people are just terrified of storms. And we're talking about debilitating fear, not just nervous, not just, I don't like thunder or lightning, but these people where they can't sleep, they can't go to work, they can't eat, they can't function. And that's not a small number of people in our area. Again, it's not unique to Oklahoma, but it's certainly, we have a lot of this here. So we've actually provided special training for our staff in past years on how to handle some of these anxious callers. We've worked with mental health professionals. And during severe weather season, we'll occasionally put out graphics like this that talk about how things you can do to reduce the stress or to reduce that anxiety somewhat. And we also have lots of sometimes strong reactions to weather situations, to weather warnings. The issue of people parking under highway overpasses and bridges is nothing new. It's been going on for decades, and it continues today. The picture down on the right-hand side of the screen, it was not in our area, but not too far from here. And this is a common issue in the Oklahoma City metro area and other places. You may have seen it if you've been out observing storms or just driving. This is a common issue, and it's getting to the point where it's posing a real danger to other motorists. The situation on the left, it was on May 31st, 2013, where we had a very large, dangerous tornado moving toward the Oklahoma City metro area, and many people spontaneously evacuated their homes. And this is a scene from south of Mustang, I believe, the highway going south out of Mustang. This is a 2-lane divided highway. So the right-hand side is supposed to be the southbound lanes. The left-hand side is supposed to be the northbound lanes. But you notice there's nothing but taillights in all 4 lanes. This is, when they're evacuating the coast for a hurricane, this is called contraflow, where they open up all the lanes on the interstate going in one direction. This was not done by law enforcement or anyone on this day. This was done by people who panicked, who were freaking out and trying whatever they could do to get out of this path, the path of this 2.5 mile wide violent tornado. So again, the reaction to severe weather, the reaction to just warnings here is extreme in some cases. I don't know if you've had a situation since some of you guys have been in the Weather Center, but the Weather Center even gets a lot of people coming there to take shelter during severe weather situations. Every building on campus, I mean, the city halls, the Sooner Mall, hospitals get flooded with people who are anxious about wanting to take shelter from the storm. Now, as a meteorologist, you have mixed feelings about that, because on one hand, you're glad that people are paying attention and people know that they, for example, shouldn't be in a mobile home, so they're trying to go somewhere safer. But really, most of these places they're going are not, in many cases, safer. The Weather Center is not a tornado shelter. The Weather Center is not engineered specifically to withstand a tornado of any type. So it's not really a shelter. So congregating all those people, and plus it causes problems in hospitals, as you can imagine, things like that. So we live in an area where people are very, very reactive, not just to the weather itself, but to warnings, watches, even outlooks. People take extreme action sometimes based solely on a forecast of severe weather. Another challenge in our area, and this is not a bad thing, I use the term aggressive. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that our media, our TV stations, especially in the Oklahoma City market, are very into covering the weather, and that's good. They get the information out. I see how there can be little excuse for someone around here, if they're paying any attention at all, to say something struck without warning, because our TV meteorologist partners do an amazing job of getting the word out far in advance. The coverage that you get on Oklahoma City TV is really, you can't compare it with anywhere else. I know many of you probably came from somewhere else, and I don't know if you've had a chance to experience a severe weather season of TV coverage here, but you know, people complain about the cut-ins and things like that. But if you go somewhere else where they don't have this, where there are no helicopters, there are no storm chasers, trackers, all the pictures, all the information that you're getting about the storms from the TV stations, I don't know, personally, I really miss it. So so dealing with this is part of my job. Dealing with the media is part of everybody in the office's job. We work very closely with all the TV stations as our partners, and we use our internal NWS chat program to provide them with information all the time, but especially during severe weather coverage, giving them information on why we're not issuing a warning, for example, or what we're planning to do with this storm that's moving into the metro area or whatever. So we try to maintain open lines of communication with the goal of having us as close to being on the same page as we possibly can be. So that can be a challenge with any in the weather community in general, because lots of people have their own opinions and they want to do their own forecasts and things like that. But again, we appreciate the partnerships we have with the media, and we, you know, if it wasn't for the media, people just would not get the same level of weather coverage. TV is still by far the #1 way that people get severe weather information. They may not watch TV all the time, but when there's severe weather, a lot of people are turning on the television, and they make a big difference during severe weather season. All right, I'm going to pause for just a second there, and I'm going to go into my background a little bit, how I got into the Weather Service, but just kind of pause, make sure everything's still going okay. You can still hear me all right? And okay, good. All right, with a little bit about my background, I got, well, like a lot of you, I got an early start as far as my interest in meteorology. I've been interested in weather and wanting to be a meteorologist for as long as I can remember. Back in the office in the Weather Center, my wife actually found in going through some childhood stuff, it was like a forecast that I did in 2nd grade, and she framed it. It's in a frame in my office. I've been fascinated by weather, and especially tornadoes and severe weather, ever since I can remember. And that's all I ever wanted to be, was a meteorologist, interspersed with every once in a while a fireman or something like that. But meteorology has always been at the core of what I wanted to do. I didn't really have an event that sparked it. I didn't have I don't have an origin story that says this tornado or this blizzard or this hurricane did it for me. It was just there. It was just ingrained in me for whatever reason, and it's been there. And I'm sure a lot of you have a similar story to that. Of course, another similarity between my story and a lot of meteorologists that I talked to is it's kind of a love-hate relationship. I was fascinated by severe weather, but at the same time, I was irrationally terrified of storms, especially at night. So that lasted well into my early teens, and eventually a switch flipped, and that terror turned to fascination, and that kind of just set the course for what I wanted to learn more about. But it started out as a lot of storm anxiety, so I feel for people that have storm anxiety, and you know, can kind of relate to that for sure. I got into weather, my door to get into the Weather Service really was being a storm spotter. And where I grew up in the Memphis, Tennessee area, storm spotters were amateur radio operators. So I learned that the amateur radio group had a very close working relationship with the Weather Service, and that's where the Weather Service got a lot of their severe weather reports from. So I took the test, studied, learned Morse code, all that stuff you had to do back then, and got my amateur radio license to become a storm spotter. And soon after that, I moved up and got to be the person that when there was severe weather, the Weather Service would call amateur radio operators into the office to come in and work, and I got to be that person. And that kind of got my foot in the door. And finally, when I first graduated from high school, this program didn't exist, but eventually the University of Memphis, it was Memphis State University at that point, actually had a short-lived meteorology program that offered the coursework that was necessary to get a job in the National Weather Service. So I was able to, later in life, go back and work on my degree. So I didn't graduate from college until I was almost 30 years old and already had kids and married and had a house and everything. So it was a little bit, you know, kind of going back later in life. So I got a little bit of a late start, but finally got to do what I was always wanted to do, and finally ended up eventually in my dream job here. So my career started out at the Memphis office. As I mentioned, I was a volunteer for the Skywarn Amateur Radio Group. I went into the office. As soon as I began taking courses at the University of Memphis, I became a student volunteer, working a few hours a week, just going in and doing, you know, some of the routine tasks in the office and things like that. Eventually, there came an opening for a paid student meteorologist position or a trainee position, and I got one of those positions. It started off with very low pay, but I was getting paid by the Weather Service, and actually that time goes into computing my entire length of service in the government. So that went on for about 1.5 years, and then thankfully, right when I graduated from college, an entry-level meteorologist job opened up at the Memphis office. So that's where I was born, raised, that's where all our family was. So I was able to go through all of that and get my first full-time meteorologist job at the Weather Service office in Memphis. And that was a few years of that. So that was kind of an unusual situation, but certainly something I'm very grateful for. After a couple of years working there, I went to the National Weather Service office in Tulsa. I was a forecaster there. I didn't stay there very long. I was there about 1.5 years before I moved on to Fort Worth, Texas. That's where the National Weather Service regional headquarters for the Southern region is. And they had a brand new position there called Performance and Evaluation Meteorologist. So I went and worked there at the regional headquarters for 3 years. And that was kind of a stepping stone position. I never had any aspirations of working at a headquarters, a regional headquarters. You're not doing forecasting, you're not doing warnings. It's a lot of very bureaucratic, administrative type things, but it gave me the perspective of seeing a whole different side of the Weather Service from the headquarters side of things and the administrative side of things. And I think that gave me some valuable experience moving on. And it also helped me get the visibility I needed to get my next job, and where I am now is the warning coordination meteorologist here at the National Weather Service office in Norman. I've been here since January of 2002. And I mean, this was always kind of the job way down the road that I looked at as a dream job. At the same time, I kind of thought, well, I can never get that job. I would never be qualified enough. I don't have enough experience, whatever. And to this day, sometimes I think I'm not the right person for this job, or, you know, a little bit of that imposter syndrome is still not gone away completely, but I'm proud to have that position. And I think it's one of the best jobs in the Weather Service. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a warning coordination meteorologist does, WCM, you may hear that abbreviation. These are some of the broad areas that you could think of as, you know, if comparing a warning coordination meteorologist job to other jobs in other sectors. We're kind of a customer service representative. We're one of the main contacts between the inside of the office and the outside of the office. So we deal a lot with our partners in emergency management and the media. We're the closest thing in the office to a public information officer. Many entities, you see public information officers for the police department or the fire department on the news all the time. We're the closest thing to the Weather Service for a PIO. And often we're the social media manager, the spokesperson, a forecaster, a manager, an advisor, a teacher. So we take on a lot of different roles as a warning coordination meteorologist. Oddly enough, though, Contrary to what the name might imply, we don't coordinate warnings. There's a lot of people that think that we're actually there with our finger somehow involved on every warning that's issued from the office. Really, our title should be probably service coordination, meteorologist, instead of warning coordination. We do a lot more than warnings. I don't issue very many warnings myself. I'm involved in severe weather a lot, but I don't issue a lot of the warnings or coordinate the warnings. That title is kind of, it doesn't really describe really what we do. Really at the core of all of this is, in my job, is working with this group we call the Integrated Warning Team. This is made up not only of the National Weather Service, but it's made up of our partners in the media, all of our partners in the media, the local TV, the AccuWeathers, the DTNs, the weather channels, the weather nations, the radio stations, anybody else that's broadcasting weather information to get the word out. And we work very extensively with the emergency management and public safety community as well. So as WCM, my job is to kind of overall manage those relationships or help facilitate those relationships. And lots of people in our office are involved. Everybody in our office is involved in helping to build and maintain and strengthen those relationships. And that's really what it's all about. My job is really about relationships. So in the pandemic era here, that's really put a damper on a lot of what my job is. A lot of my job typically is traveling around and going and visiting communities, visiting emergency managers, dispatch centers, public safety agencies, doing talks for, I don't know, Rotary clubs or local emergency planning committee meetings, and all of that's just come to a grinding halt now. So a lot of the relationship building, just like in every other facet of everybody's lives now, has kind of had to go virtual. The coordination that I do and that others in my office do with emergency management, that spans everything from the smallest town volunteer emergency manager to state level emergency management, county, federal, tribal, university, working with emergency managers, not only at OU, but OSU and UCO and OCU and tech centers, K through 12 schools, hospitals, military. We do lots of coordination, working with lots of different agencies. Typically, we'd be attending conferences and workshops, participating in tabletop exercises, going and doing after action reviews with these groups, going to meetings. But of course, all of that has gone virtual. So we're trying to still attend meetings as much as we can. I'll be attending a virtual emergency management meeting at 9 tomorrow morning. Again, just trying to maintain those contacts, even if we can't do it face to face. Our office has 10 different television stations that we work with directly. We work with 3 different television markets. There are 5 TV stations in the Oklahoma City market, including the Telemundo, KTUZ, 3 stations in the Lawton, Wichita Falls market, and then 2 stations down in the Sherman, Ada market, K10 and KXII. So we work with all 10 of these TV stations all year long. So it's we're in NWS chat all the time, sharing information, talking back and forth. But we also have workshops. We have media workshops. We have integrated warning team workshops. These are pictures from some of the previous workshops. We just had our latest media workshop. We do these twice a year. We do them in March and September. Normally they're at the Weather Center up on the 3rd floor, and we bring as many of them that can get there to come in for 3 or 4 hours and talk about weather topics. And we share information as peers, as colleagues, not anything. We're sharing the different challenges that we all have. So they have, a lot of the TV meteorologists have many of the same challenges that weather service meteorologists have. And we try to just get together and learn from each other and learn about how we can communicate better, learn about the science, learn about radar. And these are very, very popular. And we had our virtual one last month, and that went very, very well. So we'll keep doing these, and we think it's important to keep those relations going all the time. As WCM, I'm also often the PIO, Public Information Officer, and sometimes the spokesperson. I've really tried to get out of doing a lot of the interviews myself. Of course, during the pandemic, we're doing almost no face-to-face interviews, but you can see some of the media from previous years here, everything from just a TV station coming out to do a routine package on, how hot it's been this summer or what the winter outlook is. The middle top picture there is Dylan Dreyer from Today's Show that was here during one of the big, on one of the big severe weather days. I think it was May 8th of 2015, filming a weather balloon launch, and other media that was going on there as well. So that's a common thing that we do. We try to not only interact with the media behind the scenes as peers and colleagues, but we're also there as a resource for news departments to give weather information to. Also, OU Nightly, we love talking to OU Nightly when they're able to come out and do stories. So if you're ever working on a story for them, please consider us. As soon as we're able to let you in the door, we will do it for sure. Another role, role of my job is being one of the managers in the office. If you're ever interested in going into a career in the weather service or thinking about the weather service, this is kind of interesting to know just as how a WFO is structured. Each WFO or weather forecast office has a meteorologist in charge. He or she is the ultimate manager of the office. But then the management team underneath that is the warning coordination meteorologist, the science and operations officer, and then the electronic systems analyst. So that kind of makes up the core management team. So a lot of the hiring decisions, or if you apply for a job, this team is often responsible. Usually it's the MIC, the SU, and the WCM for forecaster jobs who are reviewing those applications and making those selections. In our office, we have 5 senior forecasters. Those are higher graded forecasters. They have extra responsibility of being shift leaders. And then we have 10 meteorologists. We used to have the meteorologist intern position, but thankfully that's been renamed. Once you get your entry-level job into the weather service, you're considered a meteorologist, and then you work your way up with responsibilities. And we have support staff, electronics technicians that fix the radars and weather radios. And as WCM, my role as manager, I'm not the ultimate manager, but often I will be acting as the MIC if our MIC is on vacation or out sick or something. Sometimes I'll have to be in charge of the office. It's everything from managing the computers to making sure people get paid, to travel, to discipline, to hiring decisions. We need new keyboards for the computers. Somebody has to authorize those purchases, awards, things like that. It's kind of the more less glamorous part of the job. And my least favorite part of the job, honestly, is some of that office management types of things, but it's very, very important. I'm also responsible for kind of helping managing the operations of the office together with the science and operations officer. We come up with a lot of the policies and procedures for the forecasters in the office. The image on the right there is a seating chart that we developed for severe weather operations to consolidate our warning operations into one part of the office, and putting out guidelines for how to do graphics, when to do conference calls, everything you can imagine. We kind of have our hand in that. And then, not finally, but the last thing I'm going to talk about as far as specifically my job is we're also responsible ultimately for the severe weather database for the office. So if you've ever been out observing storms and you've reported a tornado to us, or hail, or wind, or whatever the hazardous weather might be, we take those reports and that goes into a publication called Storm Data. And a lot of people, there's a misconception, a lot of that the SPC maintains all that, or that comes from them. The official severe weather database comes from each of those 122 local forecast offices who collect those local reports, and then those get sent to this centralized database. And then that's the official publication that's used for research and insurance and warning verification, everything like that. So that's an important part of my job as well. Okay, been talking about what usually we're doing. I just want to close out here with just a few slides on what we've been doing since March 15th for the pandemic. Things changed for us just like they changed for everybody else in the world, and we still have not changed back, and really there's no end in sight for our operations returning to normal. The main thing we did when the pandemic started is we went immediately to what we're calling Sunday staffing. So we only have 7 operational shifts a day. So 7 WFO employees are in the building every day. There's 2 people on a day shift, 3 people on a day shift, 2 people on an evening shift, and 2 people on the overnight shift. Normally during the weekdays, there would be management personnel there. There would be people there on training and professional development shifts. All that went away. All those people are teleworking. So if you're not working one of those 7 shifts a day, then we've been teleworking. And I have not been in the office since May 23rd, I think was my last day in the office. And I actually went in for a couple of severe weather events and some damage surveys, but otherwise we're working from home. Another thing that we did when this first began is our electronics personnel, we actually moved some of our AWIPS workstations to other parts of the office. This was to facilitate social distancing, to give people more space to work apart from each other so they're not, right on top of each other. So we have workstations spread out in other rooms in the office. And this also gives us the option, we haven't had to implement this yet, but if someone were to become sick in the office and we had to shut down part of the office to do the treatment, the disinfection and things like that, we could continue to work in another part of the office that's separated from the operations area. So that was something that we did early on, and that continues today. Of course, I mentioned this before, but since the pandemic started, we're not doing any travel. We are allowed to go do damage surveys, but we're not allowed to do any in-person meetings, any in-person media interviews. And of course, no visitors, no tours, no National Weather Festival, nothing like that. And that continues. And the Weather Service and NOAA are being extremely conservative when it comes to opening things back up. And there's lots of criteria and things that they're looking at the highest levels of the Weather Service. And one of the things they're looking at is the 7-day average of cases. And if you keep up with the news at all in Oklahoma, we're continue to go in the wrong direction. So I will be surprised if we're back in the office, anything looking like normal by next spring. I mean, I think we're going to go through the end of the year full-scale teleworking and maybe even into early next year. So I don't know how long this will last. It's just day to day and we see how things go, but there is no immediate end in sight to this. It's going to continue for until further notice. Now, during the pandemic, we continued to provide our routine forecasts and information just like we did always, but we got some new challenges because of the pandemic. One of the things that popped up is there were lots of mobile testing sites that popped up, and there was lots of tents and temporary structures that were put up. And remember, all of this began on March 15th, which is kind of the unofficial beginning of our quote severe weather season, the peak season for severe weather. So the last thing you want is a tent with severe thunderstorms. So we did a lot of special forecasts for these COVID testing sites, these mobile sites, these trailers, these tents that were erected. This is for the Choctaw Nation was doing one that was a prolonged COVID testing site down in Durant, Oklahoma and Southeast Oklahoma. We actually developed a tool, a Dss Dashboard, a decision support dashboard, where we could enter the forecast information in there. We could public safety officials would tell us where their testing location was. We would enter it into this database, and then they would have easy access to the forecast via this dashboard. So that was done specifically for the COVID-19. Another thing that happened, and it's continued to happen off and on, and may happen more in the future, is hospitals were erecting temporary structures. So we had to do more decision support and more forecast for those. This is one that was erected outside of Integris in Oklahoma City. The left-hand side is what it was supposed to look like. The right-hand side is what it looked like after some strong thunderstorms moved through. So we were really aware constantly that these temporary structures were out there and people were very vulnerable. The staff that was working in those, so making sure that they had the weather information they needed to either close these down in advance or to certainly evacuate if needed, if storms were moving in. So that was an extra workload on the office that we just kind of handled as we went along and continue to handle those even today. Now, during severe weather operations, we had to kind of reinvent completely how we did severe weather. I'll be honest and tell you, there was no playbook or there was no chapter in a manual in the Weather Service book anywhere that said, okay, if there's a pandemic, here's what you do, and here's how you work severe weather if you can't have as many people in the office. We were literally making this up as we went along, but I'm very proud of the fact how adaptive we were and how responsive we were and how quickly we were able to adapt and respond. And I think a lot of people, they wouldn't even know that things were different this past severe weather season as far as our operations go. So what we had to first do is identify, okay, we can't have as many people in the office as we usually do. I showed you that picture at the beginning of every chair in the room full. We were going to try and avoid that as much as possible. Now, if there had been a tornado outbreak day and a high risk, we would have probably staffed it up pretty much like we normally would, but we would be taking every extreme measure we could to social distance and things like that. But for all the severe weather events we handled this past spring, we tried to keep the staff in the office minimal to a minimum as possible. So usually it was like 5 people was the max we'd want to have in the office. So we had to identify what jobs could only be done in the office versus the jobs that could be done by somebody working from home. And there's certain jobs that you can only do from the office as it's set up now. We can't issue tornado warnings from our house. So somebody has to be in the office to issue warnings. And often for a bigger severe weather event, that may be 2 or 3 people issuing warnings simultaneously. You can only do the forecast and the climate data and the aviation forecast and all of those types of things from the office. Obviously, we have to launch the weather balloons from the office. We can only produce the graphics, the graphic casts that go on our website and social media from the office. And really, you can do NWS chat from home, but really it's best done in the office. So this was a severe weather event that I actually went in to work, and you can see 4 people there. There's Scott and Doug and Phil and Alex, and I was the 5th person. I got up to take a picture, but that was it. So the maximum staffing we really had in the office during almost every severe weather event was 5 people. There's a lot of other tasks that have to get done though during severe weather. So we had to divide those up among people that were working at home. That was things like social media, both developing, doing the tweets and doing the Facebook posts for the office accounts, but also monitoring social media, making sure that we're getting reports or passing along reports to the office. Another thing that we did was monitor the local television stations from home. So people who were at their home office teleworking would monitor one of the local TV stations and pass along any pertinent reports or data or information that would help the warning forecasters. For many events, we had a meteorologist at home that was doing mesoanalysis, that was looking at satellite data, mesonet data, radar data, any kind of weather data they could get their hands on, SBC mesoanalysis page, and providing meso updates to our warning forecasters in our internal chat room and also to our partners in the NWS chat room. So a lot of that mesoanalysis was done at home. While the warning forecaster, the person with actually analyzing the radar and making warning decisions, was in the WFO at the Weather Center, we also had, for most events, we had someone at home that was on GR analyst, probably, that was doing radar analysis and kind of keeping an eye on the big picture. When we have severe weather at the office, our warning forecasters are really sectorized and they're really zoomed in to a particular area of interest. They may be, Scott, for example, might have been responsible for every storm north of I-40 and west of I-35, and he's not looking at anything else, and he's not looking so much at the big picture. So we like to have someone who's doing radar analysis on the larger scale. Where is this boundary? What's, all kinds of things like that. How are the storms going to interact? What does the big picture look like? So we had a lot of that going on from home. And then some of the storm reports, like when we get storm reports from spotters or chasers or whoever, we'll put out a local storm report. Some of those were done remotely from people at home. So we got to do a lot of this. We figured out pretty quickly what we could do from home versus what we can only do at the office. And nothing earth-shattering. We just used Google Meet and Google Chat to get this done. And one of the things we implemented immediately when we started teleworking is we still do our morning meetings every morning, weekday morning at the Weather Center at 8:15. We would have a briefing where everybody that's working that day would come together and we talk about the weather problem of the day or the week, and then talk about what everybody's doing. We still do that. We do that remotely using Google Meet every single morning. And then we use Google Chat a lot. We set up some Google Chat rooms where we could communicate, and that worked out very, very well. This is a screen capture from one of the earlier severe weather events where Wayne was our lead forecaster, our senior forecaster at the office, and he's just sharing with everybody who's in the chat what we've come up with as far as who's going to do what, we'll have 5 people in operations. Here's who's going to do this. You know, Aaron's going to do the aviation forecast and coordinate the watches, and John's going to do graphics and answer the phone and do the weather balloon. And so we use chat, and when I'm teleworking even today, I have that chat up open all the time, and we use it to communicate. It's just like we're chatting in the office almost. Again, it's nothing earth-shattering. I mean, people use chat all the time, but that was something that we had never used before in operations, and it came in very handy. We also use Google Meet, and that's a screen capture from one of our meetings. On a severe weather day, we would have a Google Meet at like 10 a.m. to get everybody online and compare notes on the forecast. Have you seen what this model is doing? What's SBC going to do on the next Outlook update? What do we want our message to be? Do we need to do a conference call for the emergency managers? And again, it was this things that we would be doing in person that we just did remotely. We came up with a template for, or a grid for a staffing plan. So this is across the top are different people's initials for this April 28th severe weather event. The columns in green were the jobs or the people that were going to actually be inside the office, and the orange were people that were going to be doing telework. Now, we had to have a lot more people than usual for a severe weather event because, for example, when we're in the office, usually one person will monitor all 4 Oklahoma City TV stations at one time and just pass along information to the warning forecaster. Almost no one had a setup to do that at home. So we would, we would have 4 different people monitoring the TV. Somebody would monitor channel 4, somebody would monitor channel 5, 9, 25, and then pass information on to the office. So this got to be a fairly good system. And, we continue this to this day. If we had severe weather tomorrow, we'd be using a grid like this to determine who's in the office, who's going to do what, and how we're going to coordinate everything. Just a couple of screen captures from some of the events. This is just our internal chat where, on the left-hand side, the very top entry there is from Vivek Mahali. He's often did a lot of our radar analysis, the safety net position at home, analyzing radar, and he would just put anything interesting he was seeing on radar there. People that were at home monitoring social media would put reports that they were getting or seeing. We would also coordinate information on what we were seeing from the local media. Coordinating warnings, observations about what the warn on forecast system was showing or what the latest HER was showing. So anything that we would be doing in operations, we were doing in this chat. It also let us share pictures, share reports, things like that. So again, we used it a lot and we continue to use a lot. It was really a lifesaver for us as far as coordinating everything and running everything. And then that's just a screenshot from one of the days I was working from home and monitoring not just some of the Oklahoma City stations, but monitoring Mandy Bailey from Channel 10 down in the Sherman Ada market. I think this was the day of the Medill tornado, maybe, I can't remember, but monitoring some of the damage reports that were coming in and passing those along to the office. And then for the busiest tornado day of the year, we actually had one of our meteorologists at home who she put together this spreadsheet. She was keeping track of every tornado that was reported, what time it began, a description of it, so we could keep up with this. And this was a spreadsheet we're able to use going forward to kind of piece together how many tornadoes we had, where we needed to do damage surveys and things like that. Again, none of this is earth-shattering. This is stuff we do all the time, but the fact that we did it from home and we put it together so quickly was what was the difference in all of that. So, and again, that's going to continue until further notice for us. So we'll go through the winter season with that, and we'll probably go into at least the beginning of next severe weather season doing the same kind of thing. And this is being done at weather service offices all around the country, and we're sharing lessons learned and things like that with everybody, so we can hopefully all be able to handle this better. So, all right, that is all the slides I have. That lasted longer than I thought it would, but hopefully we have a time for questions if anybody has any. Jenna, I'll turn it back over to you and see where you want to go next.
Yeah, no, let's open it up to questions. We have some time.
So I had a question. Does the forecast office here at the Weather Center offer any internship opportunities to students?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we of course, we call them something different. Interns used to be what we called entry-level meteorologists. So there's a couple of different ways to take advantage of that. We have student volunteers, which I think that's what, if you went to work at a TV station as an intern, that's essentially what you are. It's a volunteer position. So we have those. In the Weather Service, they're a little bit more involved. So it's almost like you're getting a job in the Weather Service. You're not getting paid, but you have to go through some of the same security background checks and things like that. In the old days, there was one semester, we had 11 student volunteers in the office because it was just like, yeah, you want to volunteer, come on in. But now it's a several week process to even process the paperwork. So yes, we do have student volunteer positions. We usually have a couple every semester. Of course, with all this going on, we don't have any, but we will have those again in the future. And then there's also a program in the Weather Service called Pathways, which is, it's kind of like that paid student trainee position I got back in the day, where you're actually getting paid to work, and you work a certain number of hours. And then it's almost like a guaranteed entry into the Weather Service full-time once you graduate. So that's really if you're interested in the Weather Service and you see an opening or an opportunity for a Pathways position, that's worth working hard to get, because those are very, very worthwhile. But a long rambling answer, yes, we do have opportunities. And we also have job shadow opportunities under normal circumstances, where even if you couldn't get a year-long or a semester-long student volunteer position, you could still come in and sit in with the forecasters, or go watch a balloon launch, or help us with the balloon launch. Anything that you can do, any experience like that you can get to help put on your resume or help put on your job application, we want to do anything we can to help you with that.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else about jobs? Okay, there's a good question in the chat. Could there possibly be a way to job shadow forecasters through Google Meet? I have never thought of that, but I'm gonna make a note of that. I mean, that was kind of one of the more interesting things during severe weather seasons. We would open up a Google Meet session and just leave it open. So it would be like you were staring at the morning forecaster's face as he's sitting at the workstation. It was kind of weird, but I mean, I think there could be some opportunities to do that. So I've made a note of that. I'll check into it. That's a great question. Great question. Another thing I want to throw out there, I'm not always as responsive as quickly as I want to be, but I'm certainly there, and other people in our office are there to help. If you get into the position where you're thinking about applying for a National Weather Service job, there's a lot of people that are very willing to look over your application, look over your resume, and give you some advice. Applying for a job in the Weather Service is a little bit different than applying for a job in the private sector or broadcast sector, as far as the type of information you need to supply and things like that, and how that process works. So I'm willing to talk more about that with anybody at any time. If you want to email me or send me a message or whatever, we're willing to help people with that, because it can be a kind of an overwhelming process sometimes. And again, it's different than applying for a lot of jobs. So we're willing to help with that. Let's see. Here's another chat. I've seen some offices do occasional video updates just before major weather updates. Has there been any consideration to create regular video forecasts as another communication strategy? We do some of that. We do YouTube videos, which are just static videos before a lot of the bigger events, whether it's a winter storm or a severe weather event. We're still feeling our way through a lot of those. I mean, as a Weather Service meteorologist or not broadcast meteorologists, so we're learning how to keep it short and simple, and cut out a lot of the why that most people don't care anything about, and just get to the what and keep it short. We're also getting more into Facebook Live. We're slowly getting into that. So we're going to be doing more of that. The Facebook Lives are very popular. I think we reach more people on Facebook Live by far than YouTube videos ever would. And whenever we do one, the viewership is pretty high. So I think there's a lot of interest. We're very sensitive about not competing with our media partners or anything here on Facebook Live or anything like that. So I don't think you would ever see us get to a position where we're doing what could be compared to wall-to-wall coverage or extended coverage or anything like that. Although I think people would, there would be value in that. But yeah, we recognize the value in that, and we're trying to do more and more of the video stuff. Hopefully that answered that question. How often do positions typically open up at the National Weather Service, at least here in Norman? That really varies. Our office has been fairly stable. For many, many years, there were no openings. I mean, it was just very, I don't want to say stagnant because that has a negative connotation to it. It wasn't stagnant in a bad way. It was just people were where they wanted to be and didn't want to move, and we didn't have a lot of movement. Then there was a wave of people retiring and moving up and moving out. And we got an influx of a lot of new people in the office, which is always good. So it just depends. To have an opening in the office, that means someone has to either retire or move on to another job or leave the weather service. That usually doesn't happen. But so for there to be an entry-level meteorologist position in our office, which technically we have an open position, it hasn't been advertised or filled, because there's a lot of other offices that have a lot more desperate need to fill vacancies. There's offices that have had vacancies for years and have not had enough people to fill the shifts on occasion. So they get the priority. We do have one, technically an opening, but for there to be an entry-level meteorologist opening at our office, that means one of our entry-level meteorologists has to move up to a forecaster or a lead forecaster position, either in our office or another office. So yeah, it really varies. There's no set timetable. There was a time where we had several openings at one time, and we may go years and not have another opening at all. So it just depends. And that's one of the key pieces of advice I give to any young meteorologist or young people wanting to get into the weather service. If at all possible, be as flexible as you can when you're first getting into the weather service. If it means moving somewhere that you never really imagine working in Bismarck, North Dakota, and it doesn't really sound that awesome to you, but if you can get a job there and get your foot in the door, that's the most important thing, because you don't know how long it's going to be until there's an opening in Norman. There's no way to tell. There's no way to know really how long it's going to be. So take the openings that you can get and get your foot in the door, and then work your way back to the position that's your dream job, or or somewhere where you want to settle down, or you're not going to get that usually at the very first. So the long answer to your questions, they don't open up very often here, and you just have to watch very closely. All the weather service jobs, all the government jobs are filled through something called USA Jobs. So if you're interested at all, even if you're curious and want to just see what the application process is like, sign up for an account on USA Jobs and go look for vacancy announcements for meteorologist positions. And you can go in there and get a preview of what kind of questions they're going to ask you in the application process. And those questions can help guide you in the kinds of experiences you want to get while you're still here at OU. One of the more interesting things for me as someone who's involved in helping hire people is when we get applications into the office and we see an OU student as an applicant, but it's someone who nobody in the office has ever met, seen, heard from, and I don't know, that's not a disqualifying thing at all. I mean, we hire the best person, but take advantage of the experience. Now, I'm saying this as our office is locked down because of the pandemic, but you know what I'm talking about. When we're able to interact more, please take advantage of the experience and come upstairs. We try to come down to the lab when we can. Certain forecasters will come down on an evening shift or something and spend some time. We want there to be more of an open door. So we want to have more of a relationship with you guys. So if you're interested in working for the Weather Service, when you can, please come up and talk to us. Please come in and just visit the office, sit in on shifts, because when that job application comes in and we can say, oh yeah, Jenna's been in the office before, she came and shadowed, or this person, came and had this experience in the office, that makes a big difference. So, all right, how much does it help to have experience in web design coding when looking for a job at the Weather Service? I mean, I think that's useful. I mean, there's a lot of meteorologists applying for jobs, and anything you can do to set yourself apart or make yourself more valuable is important. So web design is certainly something there. I'll tell you that a lot of the web design is being centralized, so we don't do a lot of that in the office anymore. It's all kind of done at the national level. Our web pages are kind of controlled from the national level to a large extent. So that's not as valuable probably as it used to be. But things like GIS, things like communications, and almost anything you can imagine can be combined with meteorology, because of how weather touches everything. Weather touches everything out there, and setting yourself apart, whether it's a double major or a minor or coursework or experience or whatever, there's any kind of experience like that can be helpful in setting yourself apart in the job market. All right. Any other questions? Well, if we don't have any more now, if you think of something, I'll put my email in the chat here, and please feel free to email me if you want job advice, or if you want us to review a resume or an application or something. Let me know. If you want more details on applying for a weather service job, tips, tricks, anything like that, or and again, I am going to look into the virtual shadowing and see if that might be something we can try. I think that would be cool, and we're open to doing anything like that. So, all right, I will let you guys go. Jenna, I appreciate the invitation as always. And if there's ever anything we can do for you guys, we're right upstairs, so just let us know.
No, thank you so much. We appreciated having you. It was a great speech. Thank you again.
Thank you.
It's really awesome.
Thanks.